Sorry, just finalizing some setup. My voice meter was closed, so I had no audio there for a moment. Hope everybody's doing all right. Just wanted to just discuss a little bit of prep tonight. It's not going to be as long an episode as the VOD review nights. But I figured it was worth it to go over some prep stuff. You know, I mean, the way you prepare for a match is going to set you up for how that series is going to go, how the cast is going to go, and the better your storytelling setup, the better your story points, the better you'll be able to portray that story to an audience. So a lot of that does come down to prep. I figured it was worth talking about. We'll give people a couple minutes just to kind of peter in here. Giving off a pretty significant number of casts this weekend. Oh, well then. Mearst, thank you for the follow, my friend. I really appreciate that. I have a reason that was coming through my desktop speakers and not my headset. Let's get that set real quick. Yeah, we'll give people just a couple minutes to kind of peter in. But prep is just so important to the product that you see on screen. I mean, it's the classic tip of the iceberg, where what you present is just a small portion of the information you should have gathered and the work prepared. Here we go. Is that should be better. Definitely figured it was worth discussing. I mean, prep is gonna, and it comes down to a couple different things, and there's definitely different ways to do prep. Preparing yourself for the matches at hand. I mean, in this we can, talk about vocal warm-ups and, I mean, breathing exercises are two things that I recently, within the past couple months, came to realize how important they are. But past that, more looking at story elements and how we prepare our brains. So this will include, talking to captains and making sure you have rosters and stuff, as well as getting insight into the teams themselves. So I have a very systematic way. I write down my notes in preparing for each cast. And we'll go over a little bit of all the above, kind of delve into why each of those things are important and what we can do to improve them. Because, I mean, God knows, I'm sure, I know there's definitely plenty to be improved upon with my own prep. So just talking this stuff out. Indeed, what's up? What's up, Beck? Good to see you. I was taking a look at some of those old D9 matches earlier. It's a little embarrassing. Not gonna lie, like no lights, terrible camera, like it was at a bad angle with you couldn't even barely see my face. It's hilarious. But the casting was always the core of it, right? So all the other stuff is just a little window dressing, just kind of floof it up a little bit, get some polish on it, and continuing to improve. I'm hoping I won't always be on this couch with my gray ass wall behind me. Although I do love the painting. I would like to next step move to like a standing setup and get a green screen and all that fancy stuff. But all in due time. I probably could use some additional lighting, not necessarily better lighting, but grow the lighting setup so it's a little bit more of a 3-point lighting system. Because ideally you want a light on each side. So you're not getting a direct reflection. It kind of reduces shininess to not have a light right above you. It'll also, I use a flat light as opposed to a ring light. The light I use is intended to kind of like be mounted on a digital camera type of deal. So I don't quite get the odd look in your eyes, but especially a ring light dead on, you can see the ring in your eyes and it looks unnatural, to say the least. Oh, there we go. I thought I held a piece of tissue. It was a little snotty there for a second. That was embarrassing. So rule number 1 of prep: make sure you're not snotty before you get on camera. That's the. I think that's a good place to start. Let's give a couple more minutes before I really get into the meat and potatoes of this. But just back on setup. I mean, that's that kind of stuff you just improve one little bit at a time. And Billy has come a long way just in his setup, and it helps the look, and it helps you to feel more confident when you get in front of a camera. When you go into your cast, you don't have a feeling of being behind the times, or I mean, I find like sometimes I worry that my authority is threatened because my setup doesn't look as nice as some other casters, and it's not even so important whether there's any truth in that or not. It's the doubt that's the most important. So just as you improve your setup, you just feel more confident about it, which is going to give you better presence, better authority on cast. You know, you'll speak with more intention and feel stronger about what you're presenting. And it's, yeah, I mean, none of us, I mean, even up to the very top, you know, I was listening to Uber earlier today and talk about how he's not like, you know, the Rosetta Stone of information here to speak down to all the minions about the brilliance of Overwatch and how much he knows, or him and Mr. X knows over everybody else. It's, I mean, even all the way up, there's always stuff to learn, always stuff to be improved, and we're all in it together. I mean, I think that's what's part of what makes his cast so enjoyable. It's something I've really tried to emulate, is it's a feeling of we're all in this together. We're all just passionate gamers who love the game. And, you know, those of us on this side of the camera just happen to be the storytellers of it. It doesn't mean you know more than everybody else out there. But with that said, it is important to have a certain amount of authority, just because that's what's placed on you and you want to feel confident in it. And having a good setup will go a long way in that. Having good prep goes even further. Having good prep to where you're not second guessing anything about wording. I mean, even something as simple as pronunciation and pronouns. I think that's a good place to start, is with rosters. Get your rosters ironed out. I mean, in any way you can. A lot of productions I do, I'm fortunate enough to have team sheets where they've been filled out by the team. A lot of the teams just meme on them anyway, or don't put very thorough pronunciations on there, I think is the best way to phrase that. But we do get some information. We know the players ahead of time. Ideally, we know the difficult pronunciations. Personal pronouns is another big important one. You know, there's definitely majority prefer he, hims in the gaming community, but it is super important to not misuse pronouns for those that prefer she, her, or they, them. And I would just stick with they if you don't know. Try to keep it as neutral as possible if you don't know. But learning these things are important. And even if you just go back and look at VODs and just get a list of rosters. So here, I'll see. I wish I had a scanner or something I could have given a better look at this. Let's see, where's one of my sheets? So like this is, I even had a little post-it note on there. Let's see if this will show up on camera. Okay, so up top, I've got my rosters with roles. A lot of time I put preferred heroes, so this is the top section up here. I mean, date it with team names, and then notes from throughout the series. So just any notes I thought were standout worthy that could be important story elements later. And then at the bottom, I'll put the map set. So in tiny print, I'll put, you know, CE, HAC, or whatever the order is, and then follow that at the another half line of what the actual map was. And you'll find your own format on that, but this just gives me an outline that I follow for each series. So, it's consistent, and you get some comfort in your routine that you go through, and going through that routine again just helps with the confidence. But into the subject matter of it all, it gives you a chance. I'll write down. So this is for a European Cup for the EBC, which I'll be casting the grand finals up tomorrow with Billy. Shameless self-promotion. But also I'll write down what countries they're from, because they're from all over the Europe, Middle East, and Africa regions. And I mean, I feel like that just gives insight into the players. Just anything we can do to give identity to the gamers behind the gamer tags is huge. And all of the above goes into that when talking about rosters. So the appropriate pronunciation, appropriate pronouns, where they're from, what heroes they like to play. Now, what heroes they like to play, on top of what role, will also serve to give you some insight into what they might be doing as far as roster-wise. If you have 3 tanks on the roster and you know one's a Reinhardt player and one's a Hammond player, then you can give insight when you see that swap made. You see the Hammond player come in for the opening control map, and you can say with confidence, yeah, we anticipate they're going to run the Wrecking Ball on this map. This person tends to excel at the Wrecking Ball. If we go to some Brawly style comps later on, we may see, Mr. Rhine come in and swing the hammer around. But it gives you some insight into the teams and how they want to operate. And then you can start showing a little bit of that iceberg. But the idea is to build that base that lies underneath the surface that you may not even bring up. And that will make the tip of that iceberg far more compelling. And, okay, so, like I was saying, a lot of production I do, I'm fortunate enough to have team sheets to find a lot of this information, but you can't underestimate the value of reviewing VODs. And even if you don't know, first thing I would do is go to try and find whatever footage you can. If there's any footage available for the teams that you're casting, go check it out. And I'll have a separate sheet. Well, I'll just write down that team name. Oh, hello, dog. Poplin mascot's going to come join us. Well, I'll just have a full sheet with the team name up top, or a couple of sheets. I've got multiples of these books. I started with one for each of the different tournaments I was doing, and then one filled up, and they kind of started overlapping. Anyway, go through and write down their compositions. Write down their compositions for attack and defend on the various maps, and see if you can identify any patterns. That's a good place to start. You're looking for rosters A. And then you're going to go through and try to see what they like to play and see if you can identify patterns and what they're bringing out when. What do they like to run on control? What do they like to run on attack versus defense? Does it differ from hybrid to assault to escort? Or do they stick within their same style? The tank line is a very good indication of this, because I feel like the tank line, you're going to run more pre-made stuff and more of what's comfortable to the overall strategy. And we'll get into more of what to look into at a VOD review in a minute. But just initially identifying what the players like to run. Now, your DPS and your supports are going to flex a little bit more, or a little bit more scenario dependent and composition dependent on like what's coming in. If maybe they like to run Ana, but the other team was running pretty heavy dive, and the Ana was just vulnerable and getting picked off all the time. Well, so for that particular match, that support player might have swapped to a Moira or a Baptiste or some other hero that wasn't as vulnerable. Baptiste has the escapes and the immortality field and all that. And that might not be indicative to what they like to play, what their favorite hero is, but more so how they adapted to that situation. So that's why as much footage as you can get as possible, it will go a long way. But at the very least, write down their compositions of what they're running for each map. And it can be, I use a very quick shorthand for this. I mean, usually just the first 2 letters of a character name. Keep it fast. Because at first, prep got very overwhelming very quickly for me. It was something where I felt like I had to comb through each map with a finely toothed comb, and not just each map, but like every map that team had ever played. Try to, and that can get overwhelming quickly. You want to keep it manageable, but do expect to spend a few hours for preparing for a match. I just can't undersell how much it helps, both in confidence and into the story you're going to present. So with that said, what else are we looking for when we're looking at VODs? Okay, before I say that, let me just add one little footnote. If you, in lieu of team sheets, I highly recommend getting a hold of a captain or a manager. And Just establish a conversation with them. Just open that line of communication, and man, it goes a ton. It goes a long way. You can get a lot of information, get a ton of information. And the initial stuff with pronunciations and pronouns, I mean, feel free to ask that. It's at least, at the worst, I should say, you might get a short answer. But most of the captains and managers I've ever reached out to, and Chef Billy is particularly good at this. For a lot of our duos, he's been the one to establish communication with the captains. But they like to talk about their team. They want their stories to be told. And they're happy to share whatever information you need or whatever questions you might have. I know we would like to come up with a set of 3 questions or so, just a super brief interview. You don't want to take up too much of anybody's time. I mean, you be extremely respectful about it and appreciative for that matter. But most of them are happy to talk about what they're doing, what their squads are all about, what their anticipations and hopes are for a tournament or a match, an event, whatever the case may be. Just a few examples of questions. Billy, I know, would like to ask, is there a particular player we should keep an eye on? Like who do they think is their star player? And a lot of this is from doing CGL, doing the console league, where there's literally hundreds of teams and, no team sheets to go on, no previous information, very little footage. Many of those teams didn't get streamed very often because of the sheer amount of teams. And so that line of communication with the captains or the managers was our only real source of draw, was our only tap into anything we could learn. And so the better the question, the more information we learned. And so you can talk about compositions or what they think of the meta, the individual players. You come up with your own set of questions, add your own personality to all of this, and find your own rhythm with all of this. Can't reiterate enough. I'm still trying to improve my prep to get better, so to improve the casts. But I highly recommend it. Like that, I can't recommend that enough. Like, talk to the captains, reach out, and let them know that you're excited about it. And I mean, they love to hear it, and then they're more willing to share. And that's especially coaches. If you're casting teams with coaches are a joy to talk to. They spend a lot of time really delving into the micro of Overwatch, and I always feel like I learned something talking to coaches. I always feel like it improves my understanding of the overall game, much less of their team and their story. So with that leads us into our next point: VOD reviews. And just going over footage. Now, you're not always going to be fortunate enough to have previous stream matches of a team, but when you do, take full advantage. This is something that will give you an idea, but you got to know what to look for, right? Okay, so we've mentioned compositions, obvious one. That's your bare bones. See what heroes they like to play, but past that, see how they like to run. Are they a very proactive, aggressive team? Look at the tempo of the fights and how quickly they take engagements. Do they charge in and make decisive moves? Do they go in and poke and try to force a mistake and counterpunch? Do they take a lot of rotations and a lot of different approaches to a map? Say you're on Volskaya. How many different ways did they choose to try to approach point A? If they got stymied the first time, did they come back and hit it the same exact way and just look for better execution? Did they take various routes? Were they rushing in? Were they taking a more methodical approach in? So you're looking at pathing, you're looking at tempo, and you're looking at style. And in style, I would say, is proactive versus reactive. And I know sometimes reactive has a negative connotation, so I prefer to call that proactive versus counterpunching. And I think of NYXL. It is probably the epitome, early NYXL in particular, 2018, 2019 NYXL, is the epitome of a counterpunch team. They were extremely methodical, very, very defensive, even if they were attacking, and would force out mistakes and wait for opponents to overreach, and then they would pounce and punish. And so that's what I mean by a counterpunching team. And when you go into a VOD, you want to try to identify these things. So, and that's just general style. So remember, tempo, compositions for first and foremost. Tempo, style, pathing. These are all just general things that you could be looking for to kind of simplify what you're looking at and simplify your notes so it doesn't feel overwhelming just going over hours and hours of footage. Then we get into a little bit more nitty gritty when looking at VOD reviews of teams. Look at how they use their ultimates. Look at how they combine their cooldowns. Look at how they win fights. Are they always looking for a similar win condition? Do they rely on a superstar player to make it happen and pour all of their resources into a superstar player? Or is the responsibility a little bit more shared? Do you feel like the tanks are creating a ton of space and really pressing the issue? Or do the tanks just give enough room for the DPS to work and for the DPS to pop off and find those early picks from which then they get aggressive? So your tanks are always leading the charge, so I don't want to say your DPS are leading the charge, but you can look at how aggressive a team's tanks are as indication of what kind of style they're running to run and what they're looking to accomplish, what their win condition is. And this varies quite drastically from team to team, and something I'm still learning the nuances of, and something I definitely want to get better at is reading those kind of nuances within a team. And this is all going for identity. I think that's the real ticket. That's the real name of the game. Prior to the cast, you want to have some identity to the players and to the team as a whole. And so all of these things are just looking to reinforce the identity of that team. And it's tough. It's tough to really separate out, especially if you have a ton of teams, right? But to really separate out what makes Team A unique from Team B. Another way you can look at it, going past VODs, or another important aspect, is the way I should phrase that, is looking at any history. So, and this is true up to contenders as it is down to the console gaming league and individual small tournaments. I started in mid 2019 or so, and was just doing a series of small tournaments. That's what the D9 reference early in the stream was referring to. It was one of those smaller tournaments. Didn't last very long, usually a couple weeks to a month. But seeing trends and history between the teams, seeing which teams were competing in these tournaments and their reputation, how they did, and you start to see trends. So if a team, I did, 6 or 7 of them over the course between like May and January. And you could see, did a team start off weak and gain momentum and really get their act together, as they were, and once you saw them a couple tournaments later, were they consistent? Did they perform in all of, did they even participate in all of the tournaments? I mean, this leads to some obvious storylines. If you remember the console Xbox scene from those days, there's a team called Kinetics, which has actually resurfaced in the recent multi-tool tournament from CGL. Man, excuse my nose is itching up a storm. I had to go run an errand, and it's actually gotten chilly here, and it's giving me a little bit of the sniffles. Apologies. Kinetics was a powerhouse through that off season. They won 5 out of 6, I believe, and then the 6th one they got second place. Won a ton in a row, and it created this story. It created, on a bigger scale, what we saw British Hurricanes do throughout 2020 in contenders. But you have this juggernaut, and it's the obvious one, right? When you have a team that's just undefeated, can anybody topple them? But if you don't know that history, you're going to miss out on an extremely important and really powerful storytelling tool, and one that's very simple and doesn't take long to figure out. If you're not familiar with that particular scene and that particular chain of events, and you go into a broadcast where everybody else knows, oh yeah, that team just won 5 tournaments in a row, and they were completely unstoppable. And you go in not knowing that, it's not only going to affect your authority, but you're going to miss a big part of the story, most importantly. And that's what we're doing. We are telling stories. We are telling the stories of these gamers. We're telling the stories of these teams. And I can't reiterate that enough. That is our goal. Our goal is to put the focus, put the spotlight on these players, and show all the nuances and individuality we can along the way. And yeah, that's tough when you maybe never see their face and you don't even know their real name. So looking at their style and looking at their history is a huge part of that. So don't neglect where these players have come from and what journey the individual players have taken. Working with the contenders trials and stuff, you do have a little bit more tools. We have the Liquipedia, right? Like, all the way up to the top, people talk about the Liquipedia page, but even that is incomplete, particularly for trials teams. I feel happy if I'm like, oh, hey, I've actually got a breadcrumb trail I can follow for this player. But even down to the console leagues or things where you're not going to have that much information, this is where this habit is going to serve you really well. When you're always writing down rosters. So if this is the way I've prepped for nearly the past year now. And so I've got books full of rosters that I can be like, man, I know I cast this person. Who was Gamer B? And I'll go flip it through. I remember it was from about this time. Oh, that's right. They played for this team. And that team got second place in that tournament. And man, that's right. They were an outstanding Pharah. And you start writing, it's like, oh yeah, you got Pharah written down next to him. And maybe even in your notes, you got a little star like, great use of barrage on map 4, one fight or something. Got 4K barrage on map 4 to win fight. And then when you look at that 9 months later, you're like, yes, that's right. I remember that play. And suddenly you're giving history. You're giving a lineage to that player, even though they may have cross teams. Another thing to look out for is, did they ever share a roster with any of their opponents or even play on the team's opposition? This is another great way to just thread some story. If you've got this team that's all played together, but this support player used to play with this team and now plays for the opposition, that's a huge story point. And it's something that you're going to miss if you're not looking into the history of the players and where they're coming from. And that just gives you avenues to run with, to tell these compelling stories. Be like, no, this guy spent a year playing with this team, and now they're the support over here. They might have some insight onto strats, how they like to operate, some of these styles. So the history cannot be overlooked. Try to get as much of that as you can. And some of that's just going to build with time. Some of that's just you're going to have to build your own Liquipedia. But it's also why it is important to write all this stuff down. Like, get yourself some notebooks. I have multiple different colored notebooks, and organize whatever works best for you. But writing down all of this stuff is a huge part of the prep. That's another thing. Like, don't just sit and watch VODs and expect to log it all to memory. Like, write this stuff down and build the story on paper, because then you kind of see it forming before your eyes, and you'll be able to fill in the pieces a little bit better. So don't be lazy. Write the shit down. Okay. Sorry, I threw myself off. So we've talked about getting history. Make sure you get history on players and teams. Looking for an identity for these teams. Now, and that's going to come back to style, to how they approach fights, how they approach win conditions, and even down to how they use their ultimates and use their cooldowns. That stuff that can only be really learned from VOD review and getting very familiar with the teams. The other thing I think is really important to prep kind of goes outside of that. And this is something I've very recently done, but prepping your own brain to prepare for what to see. As a caster, you never want any surprises. Now, I say that. There are pleasant surprises where you don't expect it, and it's the I can't believe what I just saw moments. That's not what I mean. You don't want to ever really be caught off guard by something. You should be as prepared as possible for any eventuality. And that's, you're never going to get that 100% of the time. You're never going to know all of the different factors that are going to play into a series, but that's what you're going for. You're going to be prepared for any eventuality. You don't ever want to be caught off guard by an ultimate, the use of an ultimate, the way a team is moving around. Now it can be something unusual and atypical, but maybe that's part of their identity. Some teams, their whole identity revolves around running atypical compositions, taking unusual strats, pulling things out. Sometimes it's cheese, sometimes it's just downright creative. Sometimes it's one tricks, the classic Clockwork Vendetta comes to mind. The team that kind of, I don't know about invented, but really solidified the whole Tor May composition. That's avoided would be that spiritual successor these days, kind of known as a one-trick team. But without knowing that identity, you're missing a big part of the story, and that's something where you've gotta just get in and get into it and get into the nitty gritty of it. All right, but I kind of get a little sidetracked there. The other thing is really prepping your brain. So the other side of not being caught off guard is go through and look at a team fight. All right, we're gonna get into a specific example. So felt like I was falling behind in some of my casts. Like I said, I was getting caught off guard a little bit, especially as the quality of play that I was casting went up. My brain had to adjust to higher tier gameplay. I mean, it's the teams I was casting were getting better and better and better. And by the time you're casting Ex Oblivione or Team Doge or New Kings or some of these guys where you have Overwatch League players, either past or future, or maybe both, yeah, the quality of play just goes through the roof. So I found myself, it's like, all right, how do I catch up? How do I make sure I'm staying on top of not only the meta, but what is going on in the mid fight and what are the win conditions in these elite situations? And I use the word elite usually. Elite for me. I'm going to have to make that adjustment yet again if I ever make it into contenders proper, and then yet again if I move up from there. But coming from my past and how that growth happened, I really found it useful to go through a VOD. And I was fortunate to have VODs of the teams that I was casting. And in this particular instance, oh shoot, I don't remember who exactly it was that started this trend for me. But it was after a VOD review with Avril, and man, did I just feel like an idiot. And it was good. It was a good feeling like an idiot. It was like, wow, I still have tons to learn. But he did a great job of laying out what I needed to do to become a contenders caster, which is my goal for 2021. And I realized I needed to improve my prep was a big part of it, and that's part of what's led me to this episode here today. But Billy and I went into a match where it was the two teams that we were going to cast. I believe they had actually played each other previously. It may have even been for a different tournament. Other than contenders trials or whatever we were going into, and went through fight by fight, and really discussed. And on a side note, I can't tell you how helpful it is to work with a casting partner in your prep. So not only can you divide and conquer, maybe Billy is communicating with captains and teammates, and I'm digging through the Wikipedia, trying to connect all the dots on where these players came from and what their standings were and how they've performed in previous. So, you can kind of divide and conquer and then come back and share notes. But into this example, we're both looking at this VOD together. We're both reviewing the VODs together. And, right out of the gate, we pause and look at the team compositions and tell ourselves, what are we expecting? And we had gone through and watched a little bit of their style. So we've written down what we thought, was an identity of these teams. Not that we were wrong, but just getting familiar. And then go into another map, and we pause at the very beginning, look at the team composition. Okay, so what's going to happen? What are we expecting? Given what we have seen in the previous two maps that we've reviewed, let's stop and analyze and take this fight by fight and really discuss what we're expecting to see, how we're expecting this to play out. What is the win condition? How do they meet it? And do they meet it on this fight? And it was so helpful. So, go through first fight, dry fight, and then depending on who won. Oh, Quiet Cody. Thank you for the host. I really appreciate that. And then go back and look at ultimates. How do they identify that win condition? Pause, stop, and discuss. And then let it play out and take notes on how that further gave identity to the team and how that either reinforced or went against what we thought about that team and the style, the tempo, the way they played. Do they play traditional? Do they take the same pathing over and over again or throw different looks at them? All of those things that we discussed earlier. Then you're almost fact-checking yourself, but doing it in this manner where we paused between each team fight and discussed, analyzed, gave our ideas back and forth. What are we looking for? What would we like to see? Would the Ashe be better in this scenario over the McCree? Why? All right, let's talk that out for a moment. Then when we play it out, turns out the McCree worked and was able to help put more pressure on the front line, and the Ashe didn't get any value. It's like, okay, well, we didn't think it was going to go that way. Why didn't it go that way? So what this did was when we got to the match that night, and we spent, that was a particularly long prep day. I feel like we spent 6 hours or so in prep that day. But when we got to the match that night, like we were just Johnny on the spot. I mean, in real time, in this series, nothing caught us off guard. We had theories and speculations and ideas every step of the way. We knew exactly what to look for when we got to the match, and we could really lead the viewer. It wasn't so much reading a book that you had never read before. It was more telling a story you knew in your heart. And that comes across in your casting. It's what Bupasaurus, one of my mentors, would call listing. I mean, that's one of the results of not being well prepared and being caught a little off guard is you ended up just kind of giving, I mean, what's even the best way to put it? Kind of giving you're just verbalizing exactly what you're seeing on screen without giving it any context. And when you're telling a story from the heart, you're giving meaning behind it. And you're really guiding the viewer through the ups and downs, through the arc of the story, through the Cinderella run of this team or the unstoppable force that will just not be denied. There's always a story. It is not always super hype. I'm not saying to fake energy or to fake a story where it doesn't belong. Sometimes a stomp is a stomp. But your story behind that can be the style of the teams, why that's working. If Team Avoided, the team I was talking about that run basically anti-meta stuff, and if they get a 3-0 stomp and you go, they didn't run the meta. The other team ran, say, double shield and ran meta heroes. Why did they just get utterly demolished? And that becomes part of your story. And then some of your story is, hey, you don't always have to run meta. That it's not the be-all, end-all of Overwatch. And yeah, there's reasons people run meta. And I'm not getting into the esoteric conversations right now. My point is finding a story in it. And the fight-by-fight discussions helped us, I mean, just tremendously in being prepared to tell that story. So I highly recommend giving it a try. Again, in all of this, you're going to have to find your own patterns, find your own routine and what works for you. And you know, there's adulting to be done and responsibilities to take care of. And you're not always going to have 6 hours to prepare for your 3.5 hours of casting that night. But the more preparation you can do, the better you're going to feel about it. I'm telling you, it's rewarding. It's extremely rewarding, and it is so worth the time spent. All right, with that said, oh, I drank all my water. Oh, we'll get some more in a minute. Actually, I am kind of thirsty. I might take a little bit. Just give me 2 minutes. Let me go refill my water. refresh the throat. I'm going to let you marinate on all that. I just threw a lot of information out there. So I'll let you marinate on that. I'm going to go get a fresh glass of water. You can admire my cute dog hanging out on my couch with me. Yeah. Yeah, say hi, Poplin. I know. All right, I'll be right back, friends. Give me just 2 minutes. My camera doesn't want to behave. There we go. That's a decent spot. All right, Poplin. Oh. Scuff stream. Yeah, so I was running the washing machine in there. Yeah, the pop dog. All right, doggo. Thank you for keeping the people entertained. You're much prettier than I am, so yes, appreciate it. Hopefully she imparted some good wisdom on you. All right. So, we talked about get to know the teams, get to know rosters, figure out pronunciations, figure out pronouns, figure out what heroes they like to play. Talk to the captains. Super important. Talk to captains. Don't be afraid to reach out to captains, managers, and coaches and open those lines of communication. You can learn so much, and they are 9 times out of 10 more than willing and excited to tell their story. Look at VOD reviews. When looking at VOD reviews, we're looking for identity. We're looking to know these teams and be able to guide our viewer during our casts. That's what you're going for. You don't have to memorize everything they do. Try to get an identity for them and a story to tell their team, to tell of that team. And so when you get into the cast, you're not just regurgitating into words exactly what's happening on the screen. You're giving reason behind it. You're giving history to it. And that's what builds hype. You know, that's going to bring excitement. She taught us the sad eyes. Sorry, I just saw that. But those stories are what are truly exciting. The 5-man shatter that comes through and of its own is cool. It's hype. It's great. But the 5-man shatter coming through from the guy who doesn't usually play Reinhardt in the underdog team that hasn't, is looking to win their first match in 6 games, that'll get you on your feet. That's something that carries a lot more weight to it because you feel like you're witnessing something really important. You're witnessing something significant in these players' lives. And so that's what you're looking for. So going through VODs, look at pathing, look at the pace that they want to fight, look at how they approach win conditions and how they use their ultimates. And then furthermore, teamwork. I would say, is it more of an individualistic performance and really pouring a lot of resources into a star player, or is it a shared responsibility, kind of the shared successes and shared failures? And it's gonna. I mean, it's a gray area. It's not gonna be 100% one or the other. But the whole point is to give identities to the teams so that you can tell their stories, and then do VOD review to prep yourself. It's the other side of this is getting your own brain warmed up. Learn the metas. I mean, by all means, do your homework on the metas themselves. So that is outside of preparing for any particular match. Learn the ins and outs of the metas. Go watch the Jake coaching videos. Go watch how the micro plays of these heroes impact the overall scheme. Any of your favorite content creators, there's a lot of really, really big brain content creators out there. John Galt does some amazing streams. Overwatch League coach that is just big brain. Did some amazing streams talking about the meta. I mean, even listening to Avast and Jane or whatever, whomever it may be, Samito and J3, whoever it may be, they've all got good point of views on the meta. And you don't have to agree with it 100%. The idea is the critical thinking of it. And this is just going to prepare your brain and to make sure you're never caught off guard. And if you are caught off guard, it's for an exciting reason. That is something truly unique. And even despite your preparation, and you know at the bottom of your heart, you're prepared, this was something truly unique. And that's when the surprises are fun. And that in of itself has story. A team running a composition they've never ran, pulling out the British Hurricane match. We saw Bastion come out, and it was like, wait a minute, what is this? We saw Symmetra played on Lighthouse, I think it was, from both teams, from both British Hurricanes and Obey Alliance. Both of them brought out Symmetra and it kept with it. Where Limited Leg Day were like, they're just going to use Symmetra to get out of spawn and then they're going to make swaps. No, both teams stuck with the Symmetra on Lighthouse, and it was truly unique. And it added this interesting element. In the grand finals, these teams are trying something very different, trying something to catch the opponent off guard, and it just gave it this awesome story element. Lemon Day are very good at that as a casting duo. And then working with your co-caster. I know it's if you're new in your casting career, you may not have someone that you cast with all the time. Maybe it rotates in and out. You'll find that. But even if it's just whoever you're going to cast with the next match, it's good to prepare with your co-caster and work together and pass questions back and forth about what you expect to see, how you expect fights to turn out, what are going to be the big win conditions, or get into the micro of it, like really get critical on it, and it's just going to warm up your brain. It's just going to get your brain in that mode to when you're live, when you're in the moment, you are right there. You are firing on all cylinders, and you are ready to tell this story. You're not being drug along by the match. You are guiding it. You are guiding the viewers through the match, and that's the way it needs to be. That's the ultimate. At the end of the day, you need to have the confidence. You need to have the information. You need to have the identity to guide the viewers through the story. Again, I go back. It's like the difference between reading a book out loud that you've never read before and telling a story at the bottom of your heart, or reading that same book that you've read 30 times and you really know what the author is intending behind each of those phrases, what the metaphors are, and the amount of weight you can put into telling that story. We've all known somebody like that. We've all known somebody who just tells amazing stories. I mean, be it a teacher or family member or whatever. And it's because they know everything that goes into it. They know why the author chose to put that phrase in, or why this thing in history was so significant, due to this person. We're looking for that. We're looking for that in our matches. We're looking for the significance of the decisions made. So don't be afraid to dig deep. But you've got to know the players first. You've got to know their names. You got to know pronunciations. You've got to know the basics, and then try to use these things to really get into the nitty gritty of it. To really get into why they do what they do and what makes them unique, what gives them their own style, and then bring that to your casts. Let that guide your story when you get in front of the camera, when you're ready to go on broadcast and talk about these teams. But I think that's about all I got for you. I appreciate y'all sitting here and just listen to me rant for the past 50 minutes or so, 45 minutes or so. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in here, put them in YouTube chat, wherever you're watching this. If you have any suggestions or thoughts on how you do your prep, I would love to learn some more. Love to hear some different methods and some different approaches. So by all means, let me know. Let me know. And with that said, I think we'll probably just go ahead and wrap it. I'll give a couple minutes just in case anybody who has anything they want to throw in on the back end. Check my Discord, see if there's anything relating to this class that might be pertinent before I sign off. But I think that pretty much wraps up. I wanted to keep this one relatively shorter, because some of these have been going like 2.5 hours, and you know, it's good to have a little variety. They don't all have to be 2.5 hours, right? Aw, Billy spending time with his fam. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. I also got this, whipped up this little overlay here today. Try to give Caster Class its own identity. It definitely deserves it. This is the 8th one I've done. And the whole idea is just learning together, getting better at what we do, and the critical thinking, right? That's at the end of the day, it's all about the critical thinking. And the more we apply, the more we're going to get out of it. The more we apply ourselves, the more our brains will serve us well when the time comes and when we need them most. So I appreciate y'all hanging out. I appreciate y'all giving me this opportunity to get up here and speak my mind and share my methods and what I do. It's by no means perfect and definitely has room for improvement, but this is how we improve, right? I mean, it's like the image I posted on Twitter, where it's be humble, be teachable, and always keep learning. I think those are good words to live by. Any questions? All right, with that, I'm hoping to get more of these overlays. I worked on this earlier today, so I may refine it up a bit. You know, it's just like day one, throw it together, see what I think. But I really enjoy doing this, and I felt like it deserved its own look and its own identity, for that matter. We're talking about identity. This little episodic thing I'm doing deserved its own identity. So I want to get transitions made and maybe even an intro type of deal, perhaps a soundtrack to go with it of sorts. You know, get some background music or intro or something to go with it. We'll keep refining it. We'll keep it refining. We'll keep it refining. Words are hard. Popland. Say bye to the people. All right, thank y'all so much, my friends. Well, we'll see you next week. Have a good week. Have a happy Thanksgiving. Y'all take care.